Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, and welcome to the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. By day, I'm a partner at a leading advisory firm where I draw upon my background as an attorney to help my clients succeed. This podcast, though, is my personal project, completely separate and apart from my day job, but reflects the same passion that I exhibit everywhere for teaching, mentoring, and helping others succeed through simple, impactful lessons. It is my hope that you'll walk away with practical takeaways to help you on your leadership journey. Thanks for being a part of this community and for joining me in the Leadership Lab. Let's get started. Something happened to me not long ago that I wanted to share with all of you. I had come across a published industry ranking, the kind where researchers go out and interview your clients and your peers without you in the room. And this is something you don't submit for, you don't ask for it. Someone just picks up the phone and starts asking questions about you, and eventually something gets published. And in that publication, someone wrote the following about me. Daniel is singled out as the go-to name for consulting on corporate matters. His passion for managed digital services has made him the most prominent practitioner in the collection and analysis of digital material. And then there was this. Daniel is the best in business at managed services. So I read those words and I felt something that I actually wasn't entirely prepared for. First, there was obvious surprise, and the next was delight. But a specific kind of joy that doesn't come from self-promotion or performance. It comes from proof. It comes from evidence. From the unmistakable experience of having someone hand you your own account statement and watching the balance be higher than you actually thought. And then almost immediately, the second voice showed up. The one that said, "Do you really deserve that?" And I want to sit in that tension for a minute because I think it's the most honest place to start this entire conversation. Because around that same time, I received this prestigious recognition in an industry directory that ranks practitioners based on independent client interviews over 4 consecutive years. And in 2023, a major legal technology company named me one of their AI visionaries. Being recognized by them matters. And I'll be straight with all of you. My first instinct was actually to question it. Not because I don't believe in my work, but because even after all of these years, that imposter reflex is still very real. And it showed up fast. Here's what I've come to understand about all 3 of those moments. My internal verdict on whether I deserve them is completely irrelevant. The market had already decided for me. The ledger was already written. My doubt didn't change the account balance on my reputation. And that's exactly what this episode is all about. Your reputation is a ledger, and it is open right now. Entries are being made today, and you are not the one making them. Most leaders think about reputation the way they think about a performance review. Something that happens periodically, something to manage when it becomes relevant. And I want to push back on that because it's exactly backwards. Years ago, I started keeping what I called a kudos folder. That's right. Anytime a kind word came in from an email or from a client or a note from a colleague, a compliment after a presentation that I'd given, I filed it away. And I tell everyone that I mentor and advise at work to do the same. You need that folder, and it's not for your ego. You need it for your memory because the ledger gets written continuously, and if you're only paying attention during performance review season, you are missing most of what's actually being recorded. The ledger doesn't close at the end of a quarter. It doesn't reset when you change roles or move to a new firm. Every interaction makes an entry. Every follow-through makes an entry. Every time you remembered the detail that nobody expected you to remember, someone wrote something down. Every time you went dark on a message that mattered to someone wrote something down. And here's the part that most people actually skip over. You never get to see the running balance. You find out where you stand when someone doesn't call you back, when the referral doesn't come in, and when the room gets a little quieter than you expected when your name is mentioned. Or if you've been making the right deposits, when you read words about yourself that you didn't put there. You may remember in episode 50, we talked about karma in its original Sanskrit form. The word literally means action, your deeds, your patterns. The 3,000-year-old insight is the same one being confirmed by behavioral science today. There is research on reciprocity in social psychology that found that what we give comes back to us in kind, but often in ways we can't predict or plan. One of my favorite books of all time, written by Bob Burg and John David Mann, and The Go-Giver, framed the law of value, the law of influence, and the law of receptivity, not as a business tactic, but as the operating system underneath every durable professional relationship there is. The ledger is just a way of naming all of those points. Reputation is not a byproduct of behavior. It is the cumulative record of behavior kept by everyone around you and visible to everyone except yourself. And here's what most leaders get wrong about the ledger. They assume it only captures their positive visible acts, the speech they gave, the promotion they advocated for, the client they went to bat for. They treat their inactions as neutral, as blanks, as nothing. Well, hear me out. They are not. You see, when a leader goes silent, when they leave a message unread, a follow-up unanswered, a concern unacknowledged, the team doesn't experience a blank. They experience a signal, and they make an inference about it, about their standing, and about your priorities, about whether they matter enough to warrant a response. And that inference goes into your ledger without a word being spoken, without any intent on your part. The entry gets made regardless. In episode 41, you may recall we talked about words versus deeds, the gap between what leaders say they value and what their behavior actually demonstrates. The ledger is where the gap becomes permanent. You can give the speech about your open door policy every single quarter. But if the pattern of your behavior says otherwise, the ledger just captures the pattern and not your speech. This is what makes inaction so costly as a leadership behavior. It doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like nothing. But to the person waiting on the other side of your silence, oh, it is a very clear message. And that message goes into the books. One distinction that's worth making here, because we covered intentional silence in episode 48, deliberate silence as a leadership tool is a different thing entirely. What I'm talking about is the inadvertent kind, the silence that happens because you're overwhelmed, distracted, or simply didn't realize someone was waiting. And that's the kind that makes withdrawals you don't know that you are actually making. And here's the part of this framework that I think is actually genuinely underappreciated. The ledger doesn't just record your deposits and withdrawals at face value, it compounds them. When I read those quotes from that industry publication, I wasn't just reading a record of good work. I was reading the interest earned on years of consistent behavior. The dollar I put in, the energy, the care, the follow-up, the 1% more than what was expected by a client or a colleague didn't just sit there. It grew because the client who experienced it told someone. And that someone formed an impression, and that impression traveled, and eventually it showed up in a published assessment written by researchers I'd never met, quoting clients I didn't know had been asked. And that is the compounding mechanism. And it's the same principle at the center of the book that I've talked about before, Unreasonable Hospitality, and also the book Raving Fans, and also the book Fish. The specific act nobody asked for. The detail that didn't have to be noticed. The follow-through arrived when the person had already stopped expecting it. These aren't just nice gestures. They're high-yield deposits that pay interest in the form of loyalty and referrals and advocacy and your name being said in rooms that you will never enter. The company Zappos built its entire culture around this idea. Their mission is 4 words: to live and deliver wow. Not to meet expectations, not to satisfy customers, but to wow them. To go far enough beyond what's expected that people can't help but tell someone about it. That's not customer service. That's a reputation strategy, and it compounds exactly the way that I am describing. Your network is not just a result of your reputation. It is a reflection of it. The people who send the unprompted referral, who mention your name when someone asks for a recommendation, who show up in your corner when it matters, those people are casting a vote every time they say your name. And what they say and how they say it, that's the real black book. Not the list of names in your contacts, the list of people who would say something specific, true, and valuable about you to someone who asked. It appears that's what I had earned. And it's not bragging rights. It's not a badge to put on a wall. It's proof that the compounding had been working. It was proof that deposits made over 20 plus years had been generating interest after all. And I couldn't see that until someone handed me the statement. So I want to spend real time here because I think this is the most important part of the conversation and probably the most overlooked. The ledger compounds in both directions, okay? So deposits earn interest, but withdrawals do too. And the asymmetry here is really brutal. It takes years to build the balance. And it can be wiped out faster than it was ever accumulated. Professional reputation bankruptcy is not usually a single catastrophic event. It's a pattern of withdrawals that no one noticed until the account was empty. And the reason nobody names it is that each individual withdrawal looks small, looks manageable, maybe even explainable. But it's the pattern underneath that does the real damage. The leader who consistently takes credit for the team's work, the one who promises resources and does not deliver, the one whose door is always open in theory but closed in practice, the one who shows up engaged in a one-on-one and then checks out the moment the meeting ends, the one who asks for feedback, receives it, and never acts on it. Each one of those behaviors makes a withdrawal, and each one of those, just like the deposits, they compound. And here's what makes this particularly dangerous. The people around you rarely tell you when the balance is going negative. They adjust instead. The team stops bringing you real problems because experience has taught them you will not engage. The clients stop calling with questions because they've learned to route around you. And the network stops sending referrals, not because they dislike you, but because they've quietly stopped vouching for you. The withdrawal pattern goes unspoken until the day you notice the room is different. The energy has shifted, and you can't quite name why. One serious breach of trust can actually accelerate the bankruptcy. A visible ethical failure. A public moment of taking credit for someone else's work. A promise made to a room full of people that never materializes. Those moments are the equivalent of a bank run. Everything that was quietly tolerable becomes suddenly unforgivable because the balance was already so thin. And the hardest part of all of this is that you will rarely know your balance in real time. The warning signs are subtle. The signals come too late. And by the time most leaders become aware of the problem, the deficit is so significant. I use a running metaphor here on the Gold Standard Leadership Lab deliberately. As many of you know, I've been training for a marathon that's coming up pretty fast. And the thing every runner learns eventually is this. Race day does not build fitness. It reveals the truth The condition you carry into mile 20 is the ledger of every long run you completed or skipped over the months before. Race day just reads the balance out loud. In a leadership crisis, a reorganization, a moment when someone has to decide whether to go to bat for you, that is your race day. And your reputation on that day was already written before any of it had started. So the question worth asking right now, before the race, is this: what's actually in the account? Now, I don't want to leave you in anxiety. The ledger is not a verdict. The ledger is actually a living document. Now, you can't retrieve entries that have already been made. You can't go back and answer the question you left sitting for a week or undo the pattern your team already knows, but you can become conscious, starting today, of what goes on going forward. The follow-through on the small thing nobody was tracking. The response that didn't have to come but did. The acknowledgement nobody asked for, but everyone noticed. The client that you called, not because that there was a deliverable due, but because you wanted to know how they were doing. These aren't reputation management tactics. I want to be clear about this. They're leadership actions that the ledger will capture, whether you're thinking about them or not. Now, someone I work closely with and rely on deeply has said to me more than once that if you put enough good out there, the good will come back. That's the go-giver principle. That's the karma principle. That's the compounding principle we've been talking about today. They're all pointing at the same truth. You show up. You do what you say. You follow through. You surprise and delight the people around you. And that's not just the Zappos motto. That is a leadership practice. Because the people in your orbit, whether they're clients, they're team members, or peers, they're all keeping books that you'll never see. They remember the moment you went 1% further than anyone had ever expected, and they remember the specific act that didn't have to happen. And they tell that story to someone who tells it to someone else, and suddenly your name is in a room you never entered. That's what earned reputation looks like from the outside. And from the inside, well, it's just consistent behavior practiced long enough to compound. The ledger is open right now. Every day is an entry. And so I ask all of you, please make it count. Because remember, leadership isn't about perfection. It is about progress. Take this lesson, put it into action, and continue setting the gold standard in your own life and at work. I'll see you all next time.